Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we just witnessed a historic Super Bowl blowout, Logan. One of the most stunning results in Super Bowl history. The Eagles, with less than 3 minutes left, lead the Kansas City Chiefs 40-14. They are obviously going to win this game in completely dominant fashion. Neither you or I predicted this. We both had the Chiefs winning this game. How monumentally great was this performance by Philadelphia?
I mean, I think that's what it speaks volumes about, man, especially this defense. I think this is one of the great
Yeah.
all time teams, top to bottom, to win a Super Bowl. And I don't mean this as a slight, but to overcome what I consider to be average quarterback play throughout the season, I want to give Jalen Hurts credit for this game. I thought he played really, really well. Like, he deserves an immense amount of credit. In the two biggest games of his career, Jalen Hurts has come to duel, but it's rare, right? It's not a coincidence that the great all-time quarterbacks are routinely in the big game year after year.
Mhm.
Brady, Manning, Mahomes. To win without one of those guys, it's really hard to do. And how Philly dominated this game, I thought the Chiefs were the best team in football all year long, and they dominated Kansas City at the
Yeah.
line of scrimmage. Like, it was a beatdown. They seemed so well prepared. They had an answer for everything that Kansas City was going to throw at them. I just think they're one of the most talented teams, at least in my lifetime, to ever win the Super Bowl. Man, this defense I think is all time, and it's a historic season capped off for Saquon Barkley, man. But I think this is a historically great team.
I think so too, man. And I think that this is the most talented team, top to bottom, that we have seen in a long time. And when we talk about this being a historic performance, it really is on the defensive end for Philadelphia. This is one of those stunning moments in NFL history that just shocks you and that you do not forget ever. Like, the only comparison in my lifetime is the 2013 Super Bowl, when you have this whole hyped up matchup of maybe the best offense ever against one of the best defenses ever. And the all time defense just bludgeons that offense,
Mm-hmm.
led by an all time great quarterback, Peyton Manning in that case, Patrick Mahomes in this case. Nothing can go right. You think about the fumble going over Peyton's head
Mm-hmm.
on the snap in that game. You think about some of the moments in this game, right? The DeAndre Hopkins drop, when that's like Kansas City's last chance to do anything. Not that it makes any difference in this game, because they were obviously going to be blowouts either way, but just that feeling like nothing can go right and you are up against this immovable object that are these all-time great defenses. And it's very, very rare to see an all-time great quarterback overwhelmed like Peyton Manning was then, like Patrick Mahomes was in this one. But that's what we just saw. And it's special. It doesn't happen very often at all.
It reminds you too of the original Tampa Bay Chiefs Super Bowl too, between Brady and Mahomes, and
Yeah.
that one I think is a little bit different. Even though we knew how great Mahomes was at the time, that one's a little different just because of how catastrophically beat up the Chiefs' offensive line was. But
Right.
these are the three most the game that you mentioned between the Broncos and Seahawks. I remember that one vividly. I thought we were in for a duel, at least. You know what I mean? And it was a beatdown from start to finish. Those are the three most shocking Super Bowl results of my lifetime, in my opinion. And I
Yeah.
think this belongs in with those two games.
And this one certainly does have a lot in common with the Tampa Bay game, especially when you're looking at a defensive front that is able to get overwhelming pressure while consistently rushing four. That just makes life so, so hard on any quarterback, Patrick Mahomes included. I thought that this was a significantly worse performance for the Kansas City offense, though I understand that they end up putting up more points in this game. But like, at least Patrick Mahomes, I should say, was able to make some plays that weren't converted on in that Tampa Bay game. Like, you look at some of the throws he made under duress and you're like, oh my God, how did he get that to a receiver's hands? That really didn't happen in this game. I mentioned the D Hop drop. Kelsey had a drop early, but like, deep into this game, Kansas City had 2 first downs. This is midway through the third quarter. They were averaging 1.5 yards per play. They were 0 for 7 on third down. Like, there was never a moment of Mahomes magic. There was never a throw where he's fully lateral and somehow gets the ball to the receiver's hands. That didn't happen. He had nothing in this game. So it's obviously a complete failure by the offensive line to protect against this phenomenal, phenomenal defense, but it's also a complete failure by Patrick Mahomes. Like, I give both parties Fs. I give the Eagles defense an A plus. I give the Kansas City offensive line an F, and I give Patrick Mahomes an F for this performance. It is easily the worst of his career, but I do have to give so much credit to the Eagles defense because the Tampa Bay game, although I was surprised at the time, like you said, the Chiefs just hadn't built themselves up yet to be this absolute mammoth, to be this titan that we're talking about alongside the Patriots as one of the greatest dynasties in sports history. They weren't 17-3 in the playoffs in the Mahomes era like they were coming into today. They hadn't proven time and again to be the kings of the big game, the team that in the Super Bowl against the more talented roster comes through on the final drive and does what they need to do to win. That is the reputation the Chiefs had earned for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they never had a
Well,
chance. They never had a chance to win this game on the margins with their elite quarterback play or with their great coaching intellect. They were just completely outclassed in every way from start to finish.
the Eagles hit them with a haymaker and put them on their ass immediately.
Yep.
I mean, it's a boxer getting knocked down first round, and Kansas City never answered. They never got up. They stayed there, and I think you see the momentum in this game, man. Like your Kansas City never built anything up. I always quote this movie, but the replacements, man. Shane Falco, quicksand. You're struggling. You are clinging to life. You are trying to reach and claw and fight harder, and you just continually get sucked down into the pit. And I do want to give the Eagles defense credit. They were exceptionally well prepared on top of being dominant in the trenches today, like in coverage. They just were everywhere. They covered
Yeah.
every blade of grass. And they also got to Mahomes immediately almost every snap.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have to lament Kansas City too. Like top to
Yeah.
bottom, bro, like the play calling in this game I just thought was weak. Like there's nothing creative going. I didn't get any of that special Chief stuff. I don't know if they walked in
Mm-hmm.
here and thought it was going to be easy, but that's the thing that impressed me the most about Philadelphia. And they were aggressive in big spots that after they had knocked Kansas City on their ass, they got down and they kept hitting them. They weren't going to take no
Yeah.
today. The aggression, fourth down near midfield, continued to be aggressive to extend drives, and it worked out. Kansas City didn't do that. They played scared. And the nail in the coffin to me, like you said, it wasn't going to matter. I think Philadelphia was going to coast to a victory no matter what. Everybody in the building thought they were going to hand that ball off to Saquon Barkley, and they throw it over the top to Devontae
Mm-hmm.
Smith for a TD. I love that from Philadelphia, man. They didn't let up. They kept punching. They kept coming. And, yeah, dude, they just knocked Kansas City on their ass from the jump and didn't let up. I'm so impressed. I am so impressed with Philadelphia, man.
The Chiefs just scored again. So this is going to go down as one of the fakest 18-point losses or whatever it ends up being. Like this game was 34-0, man. And you do not get a 34-0 game without one side playing an A+ game and one side playing an F game. And that's what happened in this one. And specifically,
Amen.
that's what happened with the Eagles defense and the Chiefs offense. Like I said, the only comparison that comes to mind of an all-time great quarterback just getting melted like this by an all-time great defense is 2013. But if you just think about the best defensive performances in the Super Bowl ever, the only other one this century that comes to mind being equally dominant, you could argue the Patriots' performance against the Rams. The
The
first one I
Bucks,
thought
the
of was
Bucks
the
in
2000 Ravens. That's another good one
well,
too.
no, that to me is the greatest for a couple of reasons. The only reason I say that is because the Raiders didn't change any of their plays coming into that game
Yeah.
from John Gruden's system. So Tampa Bay had the playbook. I think they ended up with, I think, 3 pick sixes in that game.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, the Ravens against the Giants.
Yeah.
But the point that you're getting at that is so impressive to me is the all-time quarterback, right?
Exactly.
It's against Rich Gannon. It's against Kerry.
Exactly.
No slight to those guys, right? Kerry was the #1 draft pick. He was a college football legend at Penn State. I don't want to take Rich Gannon was NFL MVP. I don't want to take anything away from those guys, but this is Peyton Manning melting down. This is Mahomes melting down. That's what's
Right.
so significant.
I couldn't agree more. And that's what I was going to say, right? Forcing Kerry Collins to throw 4 interceptions is not nearly the same as doing what the Eagles just did to Mahomes. And like I said, he's going to end up with a fake stat line from this game at half when this game was effectively decided, especially when the Chiefs come out of the half and they immediately have to punt again. At halftime, Mahomes was 6 of 14 for 33 yards. He had 2 interceptions. He had taken 3 sacks. Midway through the third quarter, when he was under pressure, he was 0 for 5 with an interception, and he had taken 5 sacks. And he basically gifted the Eagles 14 points in this game because the interception that he throws to Cooper DeJean is horrible. It is an F decision. Clearly, he had just lost his composure and was trying to force something at that point in the game, but the crossing route that he's trying to fit it in is just not there. And then the following interception to Zach Bond, like, yes, Tooney is getting pushed into him, so there's contact made with him, but that was still a really badly underthrown ball, and it's a turnover inside your own 10. So this is what I'm saying. It's a horrible offensive situation for Mahomes. It is. Philly got pressure on 50% of dropbacks in this game. They did not blitz once in the first half. It's a perfect pass rushing performance. And then when you pair with that the fact that this is an elite secondary, how phenomenal they were in coverage, keeping everything in front of them, never allowing a single opportunity for a big chunk play in this game, utter dominance at every level. And that is what makes this one of the best defenses ever. That is what sets this apart from the 2022 Eagles defense, which had that historic pass rush, but the secondary wasn't this great. The run defense wasn't this great. There were zero holes in this defense. And you saw that in this game. They had A-plus performances everywhere. But even though they had Mahomes in hell and the offensive line couldn't protect it all, like, it's still an inexcusable performance from Patrick Mahomes. He looked jittery from the start this game. He's dropping his eyes. He's bailing on pockets. He's trying to climb the pocket too late, and he's just coming right into pressure and taking sacks. He's missing throws because his feet aren't set because, again, he just looks totally rattled, and the picks were terrible. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity, Logan, to defend some other guys who have had horrible playoff performances. Like, let's get a little justice for Justin Herbert here, man. Now, that's not what we're going to get. We're going to get slander for everybody, but I'm not in any way excusing the performance that, like, Herbert had, but Mahomes, when this was a football game, was every bit as bad, if not worse. And they were both in terribly difficult circumstances. The point is that that can happen to a great quarterback. When your offensive line is overwhelmed, when you're consistently under total duress, you can have a disaster class sort of game. That's what happened to Herbert. That's what happened to Mahomes. The difference is this is the guy who last week I called the GOAT per game playoff performer. The guy who I said has the highest floor in the playoffs that we've ever seen. The guy who has such a spotless playoff resume. So that's
It's
why
got a stain now. He's got a stain.
he's got a big old stain, man. And obviously, the Tampa Bay game, the second half against Cincinnati in the 2021 AFC title game, those are certainly
But
blemishes.
this is like
But
a
everybody has blemishes.
this is
Brady
like
has
a
blemishes.
this is like a 2011 LeBron level stain.
It is. It is. The difference is, of course, Mahomes has climbed the mountain 3 times, so we don't need to do a conversation about, oh, can he get it done? Is he a perennial choker? No, like, he is still obviously one of the greatest playoff performers that we have ever seen. But you just don't get excuses when you're Patrick Mahomes. Like I always say, the job of a great quarterback is to overcome, right? You're probably not going to have the most talented roster to begin with because you're getting paid an exorbitant amount of money. So your team is allocating resources to you and conceding talent because they believe that you are able to right the ship. So when things go wrong, when you're pressured on 50% of your dropbacks and they're just rushing 4, like, yeah, that's a really, really hard situation. Your job is to try to find a way out of that. And I'm not saying it's to win the game. I'm saying it's not to go down 34-0. It's not to throw a pick 6. It's not to turn the ball over inside your own 10. It's not to take every one of those sacks that he did. Like, never did he make a plus play under pressure. Never did he do the sort of stuff that we expect from Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson under pressure. So is the offensive line a factor in this performance? Of course. Is the defense he's facing a factor? Of course. They are significant factors. But Mahomes managed those difficult circumstances horribly. And that's why this goes down as easily the worst game that he has played in his career. One of the worst games I've seen from a quarterback in a high stakes spot like this, period. And certainly one of the absolute worst, if not the worst, from a quarterback of this stature.
Well said. I mean, he got rattled early and he crumbled. He just fell apart. And that's the great equalizer in this sport. The most valuable position is quarterback. The next most valuable position is pressure that you can exert on the quarterback, how you can
Yep.
disrupt that guy, right? You think about the key to beating these great quarterbacks. Seattle, all-time great defense, right? The other one that I would point to where a great quarterback got rattled would be 2007, the all-time offense that the Patriots had against that Giants front. That was a really good defense top to bottom, don't get me wrong, but it's powered by Strahan, it's powered by Tuck,
Mm-hmm.
it's powered by all those guys up front. I think Kiwanuka, I'm off the top of my head, I don't know the entire Giants D-line from that year, but it's the pressure that you can exert on the QB, and time again, that's the equalizer. That's the recipe. And so teams, I would take notes. Draft early in the trenches. What has Philadelphia been doing? They got Jalen Carter. They got Jordan Davis. They got these studs. They didn't wait. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they replenished up there, and that to me is the most valuable place you can put your assets. And Philly's done a phenomenal job of that. But this is the worst half of football. It was the worst half. I've got some other half numbers that I wanted to throw out here.
Please.
They had 0 points, they had 23 yards, and they were 0 of 6 on third down. And not only is this a massive stain for Patrick Mahomes, because I think he's going to have to wear this one, and you could see it on his face. I mean, this is one that you just going to have to wear for a long time. He's going to have to bear a lot of responsibility. But this was the worst half of football I've seen from the Chiefs in a long, long time. It wasn't just
Ever.
Mahomes, it was the pass protection. It was the receiving with the drops. It was,
Mm-hmm.
they flashed this stat up too. It was the first playoff game of Travis Kelce's career. He is the second, greatest playoff performing receiver of all time, just to Jerry Rice. The first playoff game he had ever been held catchless in his career. And on the other side of the football, I thought the discipline from the Chiefs was as bad as I've ever seen it
Mm-hmm.
in a game under Andy Reid. Multiple costly penalties on drives that just keep Philadelphia going. You get the unnecessary roughness on McDuffie, which I didn't like.
Bad
I thought
call.
that was a bad call, but they ended up kind of getting it back. I think later with a call that they got, but you've got the Omenahue offsides penalty that takes the play off the table for the defense. You get Philly into a 2nd and 26, and an unnecessary roughness penalty extends that drive.
And it would have been a 3rd and 26.
Exactly. And then the play calling. I thought it was bad
Mm-hmm.
situationally, and I thought it was just lazy process wise. And we've seen Kansas City get away with this, right? Where, oh, they're sleepwalking. You know, they didn't crack 30 points for, I don't know if, did they crack 30 against the Bills?
They did. They got 32 in that
I
game.
think it's the only game they've cracked 30 this year. And they've been able to kind of sleepwalk and, they're groggy early, like they woke up in the morning and then they get the offense going and it's enough. And it wasn't today. I mean, I thought they were just lazy play calling wise and creativity. And Philly had the answers. It was just top to bottom. I mean, I think this is the worst Chiefs game I've seen in the Mahomes and Andy Reid era,
Yeah.
dude. And Mahomes deserves a lot of responsibility, but it's a lot of guys on this team, man. And I'm not saying that to excuse him. Like I said, man, he's going to have
No.
to wear this one for the rest of his career. Like it's a game that you can't get off your resume.
There are no excuses for a performance like this. When you are a quarterback of Patrick Mahomes' level, when you're an elite quarterback, you can be excused for not having a prolific offensive day when you are under this sort of duress. When you are actively hurting your team, like he did with some of his decisions in this football game,
I mean,
there's
dude,
no
he didn't
excusing that no matter
see
what.
Cooper DeJean, man. That doesn't
No,
happen to Patrick Mahomes.
terrible. Really,
Like
really
in the
terrible
Bond
and
pick, it's like
uncharacteristic.
that throw was there, and I get that his lineman backs into him. It's like the Mahomes I know is going to step and avoid his man and make that throw. It's just the it wasn't the Grim Reaper didn't show up today, man. The Grim Reaper hit snooze.
Nah, the Grim Reaper got, bro. The Grim Reaper got a full servant of what this Philly defense was dealing out and what they've
Dude,
been dealing out this year.
Jalen
But
Hurts
wow,
took all of Patrick Mahomes' aura in this game.
he did, dude. And you have to give credit to Jalen Hurts because he played a really nice game. Obviously, the MVP of this game for Philly is their defense because it is a historic performance and it is just an incredible culmination of what they've been doing all year, especially since their bye early in the year, at which point they really cleaned things up. And this is a group that was number 1 in yards per drive allowed. They were number 2 in points per drive allowed, elite versus the run, elite versus the pass, elite up front, elite in terms of linebackers, elite in the secondary. Phenomenal, phenomenal defense. But Jalen Hurts was really good in this game. And he didn't have to do a ton, but he played pretty darn well. And obviously, did enough to where this game was a complete blowout. I do think, as always, you have to give credit to the totality of this Philly offense because I was so impressed by the offensive line, especially early in this game with how they were able to hold up against a couple Spags blitzes. Like Hurts wasn't pressured once until he threw that pick in the first half. But outside of that one play, he was really
And I mean, that
efficient.
was a complete blown aside. I mean, Jurgens and Dickerson didn't block anybody. That's not even on Hurts, in my opinion.
Well, it's obviously
I
not
mean,
on him that he sees a free rusher. You can't throw a ball into double coverage off
no,
your
I don't
back
think he.
foot, though.
I'm just saying the pressure is not like there's nothing he could have done
No.
to avoid. Obviously in hindsight he should have just eaten that one, but
Yeah, just made a bad decision, cost him 3 points. Certainly doesn't matter in a game where you go up 34 nothing. But outside of that one play, I thought that he played a really good game. And what I thought he did really, really well against the Blitz was use his legs, man. They were not spying him, and he was making them pay. He was just able to escape the pocket, and then he was seeing tons of green grass. And that's really where he had his most pronounced impact. He also made some nice throws, but generally to pretty open receivers. And I also thought, although Kansas City did some really good things defensively in this game, like what they did against the run, containing Saquon as well as they did, which was actually super impressive, the secondary that we've had some questions about this year was a problem. Specifically, Jalen Watson was just horrible. He got burnt one-on-one by Dotson, which set up a touchdown on the tush push for Hurts. And then the deep ball that like officially put this game to bed, even though it was already over. Devontae just burned Jalen Watson on that play as well. So he was really, really bad. But Hurts is identifying open receivers. He's making the throws. He's making plays with his legs. And he's doing that while, again, Kansas City really sold out against the run and successfully held Saquon in check. And the Philly offense still produced on the back of what Jalen Hurts was able to do. That was impressive to me. So he's going to be the Super Bowl MVP. And I honestly think that he deserves it because, like I said, in totality, clearly the MVP of this game is the Philadelphia defense. But I don't see that one guy who jumps off the page. Josh Sweat has 2.5 sacks in this game. DeJean has the pick six. Bond plays an excellent game. Like, if we could do a unit award, I would happily just say the Philadelphia defense is the MVP. And we've seen historically where when it is a dominant defensive performance, they'll just find a guy. They give it to Malcolm Smith in 2013. They give it to Dexter Jackson in the Tampa Bay Raiders Super Bowl. But I do think that Hurts played a good enough game to deserve it. Like, who do I think was the most impactful individual player in this game for Philly? I think it was Jalen Hurts. He's the quarterback. When a quarterback plays a really good game, that's generally hard to upstage by any other individual performance.
I think I agree. I mean, I would say DeJean would be my pick if we were going to go with somebody on the defense, right? I think Dexter Jackson had 2 pick sixes in that game, and that's why he gets it.
Insane.
Uh,
Shout out Rich Gannon.
Malcolm, yeah, gifts, man.
Yeah.
I agree with you, though. I think that, and that's been the luxury. That's the one thing that I want to get lost in this. And look, I can't take anything away from Jalen Hurts. He captained this team to the Super Bowl. He is the first quarterback, I think, to lose in their first game and get back and win in a long time.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen. And I think he played a good enough game. What he was able to do with his legs, like you mentioned, he made all the throws and he did enough. And that's been the ability of him all year is to steer the ship. And again, outside of the pick six, he managed the game. If you were going to give it to a defensive player, I think it would be DeJean, but I think Hurts played a good enough game. And like you said, that's a telltale thing to me. Saquon Barkley didn't have a massive game. He is the MVP of this team's season to me as a whole, and I think Saquon is immortalized. I think this run is going to make him a Hall of Famer. I think it's done. I think it's over. I think he could retire tomorrow, and I think he goes into the Hall of Fame.
Really?
And I do. I think this is the kind of season, no disrespect to Terrell Davis, right? A monster at his peak. But that's that kind of season. I mean, Saquon set the record for the most, you mentioned this on our last show, he set the record for most total rushing yards in a single season.
Yards from scrimmage, too.
And yards from scrimmage, postseason included, obviously, with that. Historic. He is one of 9 guys to run for 2,000 yards in a single season. And obviously, if he had had a great game today, that would be the cherry on top. But
yeah,
Saquon's the first running back engine to win a Super Bowl since TD. I mean, you've seen the stat that goes around every single year. It's the highest paid rusher on a Super Bowl
Mm-hmm.
team, right? And it's LeGarrette Blount or it's this guy. This is a Philly team that's built differently from a lot of Super Bowl winners, man. Normally it's the
Yeah.
quarterback and normally it's the defense, and they do enough. But this is, I think, this season in totality, again, obviously it would have been great to have it capped off by a historic performance in the big game. But I think this is immortalized Saquon. I think he's a Hall of Famer off of this season, man. And I think he's got other great years, too, on top of this. And he's a legend. I'm also realizing that Kenny Pickett just won a Super Bowl, and that's making me really question a lot of things, man.
Listen, man, a lot of dudes can win a Super Bowl as a backup. You talk about how this team is built, though. And of course, like Saquon, one of the great running back seasons that we've ever seen. But it's so, so much more than that with this team. And in this game, it's not Saquon. Saquon just
Them
didn't do
trench
much in
boys.
this
Them
game.
trench boys.
It's literally everybody, bro. And that's why I don't think we have seen a team that was this talented top to bottom since the 2007 Patriots. One of the greatest offenses we've ever seen that was also an elite defense stacked with all pro and Pro Bowl level players. They didn't get it done in the big game, but they obviously went 16-0 in the regular season. But we've been talking about this, and I've been saying this is the most talented team overall that we've seen in a long time. They have an elite offensive line. They have an elite group of pass catchers. They have one of the great running backs that we have seen. They have an elite defensive front. They have an elite linebacking core. They have an elite secondary. It is so exceedingly rare that a team checks all of those boxes. And coming into this game, the reason I picked the Chiefs was that I said we've seen this story of Mahomes and Andy Reid and Spags and all of these core members of this Chiefs run up against the more talented team, the most talented team in football all of these years, that specific season in the Super Bowl. And every time they've gotten them, they got the 2019 Niners, they got the 22 Eagles, they got the 23 Niners, and this year was different. That's why I think that this team is clear of all of those other teams. None of those teams could overwhelm Kansas City like
They
this, right?
slayed.
Yes, they
They
were
slayed the
stacked.
dragon. They slayed the
They didn't
dragon.
just slay the dragon, man. I mean, they brutalized the dragon and they kept stabbing him after he was already dead. Like, this was a complete ass whooping. And that's where this is one of the best defenses that we've seen in a long time. But I do have to specifically give props to Howie Roseman for some of the best roster building that we
Mm-hmm.
have seen
Mm-hmm.
ever, right? That's how you get the most talented team top to bottom. It's the GM who deserves a lion's share of the credit for that. Just in the first 3 rounds since 2021, Logan, the Eagles have drafted Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, N'Kobe Dean, Cam Jurgens, Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson, and Milton
This
Williams.
MF don't miss.
Like, that is unbelievable. Those are all of their top picks for 4 straight years, which means they're getting elite contributions year after year from new players. They aren't devastated by losses of high profile guys because they can replace them better than anybody else, right? Think about the difference between this defensive front and the one that we saw just 2 years ago in the Super Bowl. It's significantly different, and it's just as dominant overall, even if the pass rush didn't put up the same insane numbers. And they're getting elite contributions from dudes on rookie contracts. But it's not just the drafting. He also goes out there and trades for AJ Brown. He's the guy who's willing to pay for Saquon Barkley. He's able to get these superstar talents on discounted prices. Like, he paid a pretty penny in theory for AJ Brown, but that pick ended up being Traylon Burks, man. I think you do that one 10 times out of 10. It's just incredible. It's just incredible what Philly has done. And to me, this is maybe one of the rare instances where you look at the GM and you say, this guy probably deserves more credit than anybody else in this entire organization for what this team just did winning the Super Bowl.
Well, I mean, dude, I think you can take it a step further. They got Jalen Hurts in the second round, right? Like 32 teams passed on Hurts. Uh, Take it a step further. He put together the coordinators that became head coaches on that original team that got to the Super Bowl. And on this team, he replenished those coordinators and crushed them.
And
Kellen Moore's
Fangio was a hell of a hire.
Yeah, and Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore is going to go be a head coach for the Saints next season, right? And Fangio is brilliant. I think top to bottom. I do, man. I think he might be the best GM in football. I don't know if there's. I don't know if there's a debate, man. I mean, Detroit's been damn good recently with their picks and their culture building, but
Very, very good.
I think he might be the best in the league. I mean, you just because I just immediately start thinking about the Steelers, and I'm like, damn, Najee Harris and Kenny
Yeah.
Pickett, and like, just we've had some duds, man. That's how you win. You got to crush those picks, dude. That's how you swing. They make big
Mm-hmm.
moves. They're not afraid to make big moves. They've drafted exceptionally well. Dude, Zach Bond, getting him as a free
Yeah.
agent from last season and switching him to a different position, and he's all pro in his first year in
Mm-hmm.
that role. Like, hats off, man. I mean, Philadelphia is just a monster of an organization, dude. And would you say you think this is the best team since the '07 Pats?
I would say this is the most talented team top to bottom. Do I think that this is the best team? I don't know that I could say that the '07 Pats really belong in that conversation, as crazy as they were, just because they didn't end up winning the big game, which does matter to me. I can't say that the 2016 Warriors are the greatest team ever. Are they one of them? Yeah, but you don't really have a claim to be the GOAT if you didn't win the biggest game. I
Don't mean
feel
a
pretty
thing if you
strongly
don't win the
about that.
ring.
Don't mean a thing without the ring. So, if we're looking at other champs in recent years, I do think that, like, the Chiefs teams that we've seen over the last couple years were pretty outstanding. In 2022, you still had a number 1 offense. You didn't have the greatest defense, but then last year really was an excellent, excellent Kansas City defense with a more limited offense. Both those teams found a way, but the dominance of this run, I do think surpasses both. I mean, think about what they've done in this playoff run, man. They took the Packers lunch. Jordan Love had a nightmare game. They were dominating against the Rams. That ended up being a close game, but they really controlled that one end to end. They beat the Commanders by 32, and then they went up 34 to nothing in this game. There's not a lot of runs that dominant end to end in NFL history, man. So again, I might go back to like the 2013 Seahawks because they punctuated it with such a dominant victory in the Super Bowl and they were such a dominant all-time great defense. But even their playoff run in totality wasn't quite as dominant as this one. I do think this is one of the stronger Super Bowl champions that we have seen since 2000. I do. I mean, you can look at some of the peak Patriots teams, and of course, they're going to make a case. Legion of Boom, some of the recent Chiefs teams. But, like, who can you clearly put above this Philly team that we just saw?
I'm trying to find a stat. I want to see the best point differential for a team in a single playoff run. And it's weird because
I think it's probably the 85 Bears, right? Because they literally just destroyed
the
everyone. The
Bears were
85
dominant.
Bears
The
won
nine.
21 nothing, 24 nothing, and 46-10.
Wow, they got to be number one. I mean, the Niners maybe from those years might have had a run.
The 89 Niners won 41-13, 30-3, and 55-10. So to be clear, I mean, I'm not saying ever.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying this century, this Philly team is up there.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say is you think about some of the best defenses that have won Super Bowls. I think there's a different kind of explosiveness and talent with this offense to
Mm-hmm.
some of those teams, right? You think about the 2013 Seahawks. As much as I love them, you don't have the kind of talent they have on the outside that this Philadelphia team does. Okay.
No.
We think about the 2008 Steelers, right? That's another dominant defense. They don't have the kind of like I love San Antonio and I love Heath and that offense wasn't nowhere near as explosive as this team, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
The 2015 Broncos didn't have close to this sort of offensive talent
no
and
like
punch.
in like the
2000
Ravens,
Ravens, not even
e-
close.
exactly, man, and that's the difference is they can do it all and they can win in so many different ways. That's what this is a testament to. I mean, they're just complete. There's like you said earlier, dude. You said it about the defense. There's just no holes. This is a team that was truly, truly complete. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm really trying to think, man. I don't know. The list is not long of how many teams since 2000 that I'd have above this Philly team.
Yeah, we do have Trevor with a generous donation who mentions the 2014 Patriots team. That's probably the best of any of the Super Bowl winners. Elite offense, really,
The
really good
2010 Packers
defense.
too. I think they were really good too. That Packers team was
Well,
good.
Yeah, they weren't a dominant regular season team, though. The
Oh yeah, you're right.
2011 Packers were the dominant
They were
regular
a wild
season
card, but I
team.
think I think that was a pretty high rated offense and defense.
Yeah, but this Philly team, man, I mean, they didn't lose a game with Jalen Hurts after,
True.
again, their week 4 bye.
And
So
bro, they're a
that's a
Saquon catch.
long
I
ass
mean,
win streak.
their one loss against Atlanta was kind of fake, you know.
They didn't have receivers on the field when they lost to Tampa. The Saquon drop you mentioned, and then the Commanders loss is when Jalen Hurts gets hurt. Can we talk ourselves into this Philly team being
Maybe, man.
undefeated,
Yeah,
Logan?
maybe.
Not that far away, but I do think that they are in that upper echelon of Super Bowl champions since 2000. We have a lot of generous donations that I want to get to here, so we're going to run through those now. Dylan with a very generous donation. The devil got exposed. Brady is the greatest of all time, and that is interrelated with another generous donation from Trevor, who says, I don't know if you guys brought it up or not, but how does this affect Mahomes' legacy? Such a terrible loss on the grandest stage when someone like Brady, who has 3 losses, but it was never by multiple possessions. What do you think, Logan? Like, does this kill the Mahomes GOAT case? What does this really do for his legacy?
I mean, it hurts his reputation for sure, but when we're talking about that, I mean, the reason this is such a shocking loss is because the standard and expectation that Patrick Mahomes has set for himself. That's why this is such a shocking loss. You know,
Mhm.
I definitely think that Brady has some concrete things over him for sure, right? He's got the overall ring count still. He won the head-to-head battle, 2-0 in the playoffs in meaningful and important games. People are always going to lean on that when we're talking about that against Brady. But let me be clear about something. This doesn't fundamentally change who I think or who I know Patrick Mahomes is, but it's something that he's going to have to wear. Peyton Manning has to wear all of those horrible losses that he had in the playoffs, right? It's like you were saying earlier, Carson. No quarterback is adverse to a bad game like this. Big Ben has to wear some of his Super Bowl loss against Green Bay where he throws a pick six. The thing that this proves, man, is I mean, if you can exert pressure on a quarterback, pressure busts pipes, and
It
sometimes a
does.
guy can just lost it. I've never seen Mahomes' composure lost like this, and that's what was so shocking about this game. It doesn't fundamentally change, and I don't. He can overcome this, right? Mahomes could win a Super Bowl next year and then rewrite it, right? I don't want to live too much in the moment, but he has to bear responsibility, and this is a hard game to just wipe away. You can't do it. I mean, it's like you said earlier, Carson. I don't know if he caught this, but it's one of the worst losses I've ever seen from a superstar quarterback. Superstar quarterbacks don't crumble like this, and it's
Yeah,
uncharacteristic. I will say this: Brady has had some bad playoff games. I don't think Brady ever had a game as bad as this.
I would tend to agree. I think the only other all-timer who you can talk about with a performance like this in a Super Bowl, at least, is probably Elway. And Elway had a couple that were really,
Peyton,
really
I mean,
bad.
if you're just
Peyton was
absolving,
so bad. That does have to be mentioned, but it wasn't as bad as this Mahomes game. It was really, really bad, but I felt like Mahomes was more catastrophic in the first half even than Peyton was. But I guess we're kind of nitpicking at that point. Like, yes, you're right. It belongs to be in
but
the
I mean,
same
those are,
conversations. It's a
but
terrible
it's,
performance against a great defense.
but you're right. I mean, when you're in those conversations, it's tough because it is Elway, it is Peyton. I'm racking my brain right now trying to think if there's anybody that we're forgetting. But that's the pantheon to me. Those three guys.
So we have another donation from Julian. On Twitter, you said LOB is the only better defense. Forgot 2015 Broncos defense. Also PS21 Depoy, and y'all barely mentioned him in your
Put
predictions.
some respect on the '08 Steelers.
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna clarify what I said on Twitter. I said of the last decade-ish, I think that the only defense clearly better than this Philly defense that we just saw
I
is
think.
LOB, because LOB had 3 straight
hmm
years where they're the number 1 scoring
I
defense,
think
like,
them
by far.
the Broncos team. What was the no
The
fly
Broncos team
zone?
was great. No fly zone was great,
I mean,
man.
elite pass rush play from Von Miller. Elite secondary
Elite
play.
secondary, but, like, I
Good
don't think that
linebackers.
we can overstate how
I
insane
think
this
they're better.
performance we just
I
saw
think
from
Philly's.
Philly is.
I think Philly's better. I think Philly's better than. Can I say Legion of Boom?
Nah, I wouldn't take him over LOB, man. Also, LOB replicated it year
True.
after year, and they have the performance that is on the same level as this one that Philly just put forth with the 43-8
But it's an
2013
all.
Super
I think
Bowl.
it's an all time unit all things considered.
Yeah, and if we expand it further back, obviously, like the 2000 Ravens, right? The 85 Bears. But that's why I said, if you view it as like since 2010, and there was a great Steelers defense in 2010, the year
In
that they lost in
2011,
the Super
the
Bowl, that
Niners,
was a
those
great
Niners
defense.
defenses were really good.
Great, overshadowed arguably just by how
Even
phenomenal the
Baltimore,
Seahawks were.
I'll say those 2010s Baltimore's teams with Nada and Suggs and Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. I mean, those
Really,
teams
really
were
good.
really good too. But these are the conversations are in, man. I think
Yeah,
I think they belong. I think they belong.
they do. They belong in those conversations for sure. Dylan is back with another generous donation. No hate for me. Mahomes is number 2, but Brady didn't get exposed like this. The bigger take for me is that Gronk's over Kelsey. From a Cardinals fan, I hated the Pat. Let's start with the Mahomes point. So, do I think that this kills Mahomes' GOAT case? Not in the slightest. I'm just going to be real about that. Like, football players play hundreds and hundreds of games in their career, and they will play dozens and dozens of games in their playoff career if you are talking about a guy of the Mahomes and Brady caliber. And there's only 2 guys actually who have that sort of volume in terms of the playoffs, but that's the trajectory that Mahomes is on. So yes, this is a terrible performance, but no, it is not something that like singularly says you can't overcome this to become the greatest ever. I still think Mahomes is on the GOAT trajectory. I still think this 7-year run that he's on is the best that we've seen from any quarterback ever. And he's ahead of schedule, man. Guy hasn't turned 30 yet. And his production is out of this world. The talent is probably the best that we've ever seen. And the playoff
I
resume
mean,
per
and
game,
I don't know
still
about
unbelievable.
I don't know about you, Carson. I'll stand on it. I don't really care. Mahomes is still my guy. I would still take Mahomes
So would I.
under center. You give me choice of, and I've done this thought exercise before, and I can give you probably the top 10 guys off the top of my head. But the guys I want under center, you're giving me an all-time fantasy NFL draft. I can take whatever quarterback. My big board, Mahomes is still number 1. I think Rodgers is still number 2. Brady is still
Wow.
number 3 for me. Allen is 4. I
No, I
think
love that.
I think I had Peyton 5 or something like that. Mahomes is still number 1 to me. One game does not a QB make, and like I said, like you gotta wear it. I'm not absolving Mahomes or trying to wash this away. It's an ugly ass game, but I've seen a lot of
It
guys
is.
play ugly ass games, and this is a great defense. And the one point again, I don't want to clear. I don't think Brady's ever had to deal with an offensive line situation as bad as we've seen the one against Tampa Bay or in a game like this. I don't know if Brady ever had to overcome the kind of offensive line play that Mahomes dealt with today. And again, that's not to make an excuse for this game. Mahomes played a horrible football game,
Yeah.
but I don't think Brady ever had to deal with these kind of circumstances.
Well, and the one thing that I would say also is Brady is still clearly the GOAT to me.
The GOAT,
I've
yeah,
never
yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
entertained that conversation at this point.
It's
I
Jerry
am with
Rice,
you.
it's Lawrence Taylor, it's Tom Brady, and
I'm talking quarterbacks here.
of
Yeah.
course, of course.
If you give me one game, if you give me peak, I'm taking Patrick Mahomes. I stand by that as well. This game does not overwrite that for me. But like any all-time ranking, any all-time conversation is a balancing act between peak and longevity. And Tom Brady just so happens to have, to me, a top 2 peak in the sport and the greatest longevity that we've ever seen. So Patrick Mahomes at 29 years old just can't stack up to that, right? He's got to do it for another decade. And can he do it? Absolutely. I think that he can. I think that he's on the trajectory. But is he there? No. And I think if somebody tells you that he is, they're like an absolute peak purist, which to me just doesn't really make sense. I don't think that's ever how we evaluate and rank athletes. It's always a combination of the two. So Brady is still definitely number 1, but this is not a disqualifier for Mahomes.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're just talking like you can't. That's why you can't do the career thing with Mahomes yet. I mean, it's just so clearly Brady. Brady's numbers are untouchable. Like,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. Like, and you said a decade. I mean, damn man, Pat might have to do it for another 15, like Brady. You
Yeah.
know,
See, I don't know that he has to match Brady's longevity because the thing is, Brady, although he was obviously winning Super Bowls very early in his career, he was not putting forth the sort of individual dominance that Mahomes was from his
he
first year as
gets
a starter,
be
where we're
in
talking
retro
about a clear MVP all-time season.
in retrospect, Brady gets probably, and this is not to take anything away from Brady, a little too much credit for those first 3 Super Bowls because of the how he built himself up, right? The best offenses that we ever got from the Patriots, those teams never won a Super Bowl. That was the crazy thing. The best offenses were with Moss and
Mhm.
Wes Welker and
Right.
Gronk and then Hernandez, right? Those are the best offenses. They won Super Bowls when they had the most complete team around Brady in the trenches for the most part. And that's why you had that towards the end of his career. And they were still producing great offenses. Let me be clear about that. But even at his apex, right? They didn't win rings. It's but those first runs were definitely more defense and run predicated.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's what's
whereas
so
I think it's
incredible.
different with Mahomes.
That's what's so incredible about Mahomes' first 2 rings. He did it in 2019 with a below average defense. He did it in 2022 with a below average defense. That is something really exceptional that Brady never did. That is why Bill Belichick, to me, is the greatest coach of all time. He was the architect of 2 decades of elite defense. That's the sort of thing that keeps you in contending conversations every single year. Like, normally, you need both that and you need the elite quarterback and the elite offense. Mahomes is kind of the only dude we've ever seen who year after year can put you in those conversations
Breeze.
earlier
Well,
in his
actually,
career.
not even because I mean
No,
Breeze's
because Breeze
teams
went
were
7-9 when he was
yeah.
putting forth crazy offenses. Now
Well,
those defenses were crazy
I was
bad.
just trying to I was just thinking about guys who had really bad defenses. Marino
Right.
and Breeze.
To win the Super Bowl, though, is what I'm saying. And to be in the AFC title game
Just
every year.
Breeze. Well, you're saying every year. I was
I'm
saying
saying Mahomes.
individual. Yeah, it
But
is.
Mahomes did it year after year. And now he has had the defenses these last 2 years. But that's why, to me, the peak for him is number one. But we do have a question or a ranking from Trevor, who has donated again. Thank you. 1 Brady, 2 Montana, 3 Manning, 4 Mahomes, 5 Rogers, 6 Breeze, 7 Elway, 8 Marino, 9 Unitas, 10 Young. Rate my list, Kings. I would have Mahomes too. I think his peak is just clear of everybody else. And I think that the significance of the winning, it's
Mm.
already enough. He already has the second most playoff wins in history, and per game is like top 3 in everything in the playoffs.
I would have Mahomes too as well. I think I might have. I think I'd have I think I'd go Montana or Rogers at 3 and 4. Then I'd go Peyton. Then I'd
I'd
go.
have Steve Young a few spots higher also. I think Young is better than Elway. I think he's better than
I have him
Marino.
over
Efficiency GOAT.
Marino. Over Marino.
I would have him over Marino. I can see the case that Marino just did it for
I
longer, though,
wouldn't
because
also
Steve was such a late bloomer.
Elway would not be in my top 10. I would not have John Elway in my top 10. He would be
I
excluded.
agree.
I would have Josh is close, honestly, in my top 10 now. I'm not going to lie to you. Even without
Cook.
the Super Bowl right now, I think Josh is maybe either in my 10 spot. In respect to the old guys, because I think Johnny Unitas is very high.
I think if you're rating relative to era, which is what I like to do, I think that Unitas
Definitely.
is probably
Also,
top
Otto
5.
Graham, I never put Otto Graham in these lists, but Otto Graham also just never lost,
I
which
agree.
you got to respect.
I agree. And Johnny U was just so far
Far ahead
outpacing
of his.
everybody else by
Yeah, man.
production, by the biggest gap that we've ever seen.
But
But it's a solid
I don't
list.
hate the list. Yeah, it's pretty solid.
I like the Marino respect a lot. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, guys. Then we'll get to some more of your chats. We'll get to the Kelsey versus Gronk debate that the people are fiending for after some quick words from DraftKings. This ain't the little itty bitty teeny tiny bowl. This is Super Bowl 59. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59.
Scoring touchdowns is key to hoisting the Vince Lombardi trophy, and you have a shot to score big by betting on them all at DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score 6. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick.
New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Dylan says, I get the quarterback talk, not here to argue it, but the Gronk versus Kelsey debate is over. I think Kelsey's the GOAT.
Are we
I just think
going
it's another
peak
instance
or
of longevity
yeah,
outweighing
yeah,
peak.
yeah.
Peak, give me Gronk.
For sure.
Peak, give
No
me
doubt.
Gronk. 2011 Gronk is without a
You
doubt the greatest tight end season ever. That
please
sort of receiving production, like
Mhm.
1,300 something yards, 17 touchdowns, while being the best blocking tight end to also be a legitimate receiving threat ever, no question. But Travis Kelsey, we're talking about a decade of star production with playoff production that is only surpassed by Jerry Rice. And Gronk, unfortunately, just one of the most injury-riddled superstars of the 21st century.
Well, and honestly, respect for Gronk for playing as long as he did for his
Yeah.
play style. I mean, I think his longevity is impressive, injuries included and
Still
everything.
catching 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl for the Bucks, still being
Exactly.
productive. Like, when
Like
he was on the field, he was a monster.
he made plays happen, but please don't let this one game just overshadow everything Travis Kelsey has done in his career. He is easy money. I mean, it's just
Mhm.
he's going to get open, he's going to find spots. I think he's the GOAT. And credit to Tony Gonzalez. I have Gonzalez behind Gronk and Kelsey. I think Gronk's two, but
Yeah.
Kelsey's
Gonzalez does
longevity
also
just
have incredible longevity, though.
he does, and he was productive even late into his career with the Falcons when he was
Mhm.
with Matt Ryan. Like Gonzalez has a really good case, but I just think Kelsey's resume is it's too overwhelming. He did it for too long, man.
Yeah. Well, Austin makes a good point. Can we finally put the Juju Smith-Schuster versus Robert Woods debates to rest, guys? Quit bringing it up. Bobby Trees clears. We already know. Bill's legend. Bobby Trees for life. That's my guy. Julian has donated again. Says 2015 Broncos dragged an awful offense to a chip. They're the better defense. Also, please react to PS Do Depoy. Parentheses least obvious Broncos Glazer. It is true that the 2015 Broncos dragged a far inferior offense to a chip. However,
I think
the
it's
Eagles would have won this Super Bowl, dare I say, without the offense they had. They were blowing people out because their defense was dominating so thoroughly. The Washington game, they did have to really put up points. They didn't have to put up points to win this game.
I
Like,
mean,
they were up 24 nothing, and their offense really hadn't done much at all.
I will give him credit. That's one of the worst offenses I've ever seen win a Super Bowl, bar none. Peyton had no arm. His only value
Mhm.
to the offense, and you could see it on tape every game, is just him audibling at the line of scrimmage and adjusting plays. And shout out, but his role was to hand the ball off, to not turn it over. I mean, they switched for mid-season. They benched him for Brock Osweiler.
Yeah.
And then they win the Super Bowl with Peyton back under there. Like, Peyton was immobile. He was inaccurate. He couldn't throw the ball more than 20 yards downfield. He was a corpse. Like, it was his
Mhm.
brain versus the defense. And so I think that Broncos team deserves a ton of credit.
For
Also,
sure.
shout out Surtain. I thought George Pickens kind of owned him in their head to head matchup. I get that he didn't put up the yardage. He had a huge play taken back in that game. And I think Surtain had like 2 or 3 penalties that amassed like over 100 yards and for offense, but
Pickens masterclass disqualifies him.
not. I mean, he had a great year.
He had an
I just,
incredible year.
I just struggle giving it to a cornerback when I just think you can't match the value an edge
Yeah,
rusher has, and I think that Miles, to me, no shade at him. I think this was like a cumulative Broncos defense award, and I don't mind that
totally.
inherently. Like they gave it to the best defensive player on the best defense. So I didn't mind it because I thought it was a really close race between a lot of guys, but I just thought Myles Garrett was the best defensive player in football.
I thought Myles Garrett deserved it as well. Surtain, incredible, incredible corner season. And I think that his elite coverage ability was fundamental to how great this Denver defense was, how aggressive they could be with their pass rush up front, just having faith that he was going to be clamps and that that entire secondary was an awesome, awesome group. But it's like you said, it's kind of a positional value thing. When Myles Garrett is at the peak of his powers, he's just a complete wrecking ball, and an edge rusher is just going to be more impactful even than the best corner in football, which I think that Sertan clearly was. We have a donation from Chunk who says one thing that has to be talked about though is how bad he's been the past 2/3. He just doesn't have that best quarterback in the league feel to him anymore. I'm assuming this is about
Who?
Patrick Mahomes. I'm
His
assuming it's about
his
Mahomes.
last 2 or 3 what?
Well, Logan, I'm
Games?
just reading to you what this says.
Well, I mean, I think if
I
you're looking at
presume that this means 2/3 years, or
uh,
perhaps 2 out of 3
maybe
Super
he's
Bowls, but
saying
that's
for the
definitely not
Super
true
Bowl,
because he was really good in
if
2 of the
you
last
that's
3.
what I hate with box score watching when we can do this revisionist history. Don't get me wrong. I think Jalen Hurts was the best quarterback on the field that day. He just made the costly error, like the fumble return for a TD. But
Mhm.
I hate when people don't act like Mahomes didn't have an excellent game. Like
He was flawless.
he played a great game. Like that just doesn't hold water to me. Like he played a great game against I don't get how he's come I get that this ended up being a blowout. He has come back from being down 10 points in every Super Bowl win of
Yeah.
his career. The the first run, I think they were trailing by almost 20 in every single game, right? He erased that 24 to nothing deficit against the
Hmm.
Texans in the 2019 divisional round. Like, no, man.
Yeah.
I know what Patrick Mahomes is. This you can have a
I
bad
totally
game.
agree.
Like it's just his body of work overwhelms this game.
I totally agree. I read off these stats on our preview show, but coming into this game, he's number 2 all time in total yards per game in the playoffs. He's number 3 all time in total touchdowns per game in the playoffs. He's number 2 in total touchdown to turnover ratio. He's number 1 in passer rating in the playoffs. Already number 2 in playoff wins. Was number 1 in the Super Bowl era in win percentage. Chiefs offense has averaged 30 points per game in the playoffs. Only quarterback in NFL history with a winning record in the playoffs when his defense allowed
That's
29 plus points. Now,
that's
that one I don't think
crazy.
is true. Now I think he's back to 500 after this loss, but already second all time in terms of fourth quarter comebacks in the playoffs. Like, he is the best combination of talent, production, efficiency, clutch performance that we have seen in the playoffs. And I still think that that's true after this. And I think some people try to downplay his regular season. It wasn't the best regular season. He didn't deserve to be the MVP or anything. I still thought he should have been top 5 in MVP voting, but he certainly didn't have a case up against Josh or Lamar. But when he turns up to the level that he did, like against the Bills in the playoffs, and the level that he's consistently gotten to in the playoffs, he's just proven himself to be one of
Well, I
those
mean,
all-timers, and he has done it. He has done it in recent years. This was the one exception. If he had played a really good game, this would have been 3 years of flawless playoff football from Patrick Mahomes. And this was a
we've
terrible game, but it doesn't undo all of the great stuff. It just doesn't.
people can take their victory laps now. They're happy that the rain is over. The Eagles were the clear face in this game. You could hear it in the building. You could see it on social
Oh,
media.
yeah.
The Chiefs come out, they get booed. Eagles come out, crazy cheers. Like the Chiefs at this point are the Death Star. They're the bad guys. Like, and I think they accept that role. And people are going to take this as a victory lap on Kansas City. They're going to take a victory lap on Mahomes. I get it. I did it when Brady lost to Nick Foles in the Super Bowl. I couldn't wait to see them go down. Like, I
But it
get it.
wasn't over then, Logan, and it's not over now.
Exactly. The Grim Reaper ain't going nowhere, man. Y'all have given
Nope.
him, and that's what's scary to me. Y'all are giving the Grim Reaper some nightmare fuel. Y'all gonna let him internalize this loss, and maybe Mahomes comes back as an even bigger beast. I just have way too much respect for Mahomes and what he's done in his career up to this point to let one game undo whatever, man. To me, the quarterback this said the most about in this game is Jalen Hurts, is that he can do it when the big game is on the line. 2 Super Bowls, as much shit as I give Jalen Hurts, and I still don't know if he's a top 10 quarterback. Take issue with that if you want. He has proven himself. He hasn't crumbled. I've never seen Jalen Hurts fall apart in the Super Bowl. He has played great football in 2 Super Bowls. And so I would just spin it in a more positive direction when we're talking about quarterbacks. Mahomes played a shitty game. I ain't gonna dress it up, but Jalen Hurts, this game said more about Hurts to me than it did Mahomes.
Yeah, sometimes all-timers have stinkers. This is an exceptional one for Mahomes. This is really, really, really bad, but we don't need to do revisionism with his entire career and the level that he's been at. We have another donation from Trevor. Thank you, Trevor. And another question to you guys. What's the difference between GOAT, greatest, and the BOAT, best of all time? I don't really like to make a distinction. To me, the only difference that you could say is boat is just peak. That's a funny term, boat. But like if you're saying best, you just mean at the peak of their powers, who was the best to ever do it. And then greatest is the totality of their resume, longevity, peak, all of that balanced. But generally, when people talk about the difference between greatest and best, it doesn't really resonate with me unless you're talking about the difference between eras and the fact that talent is always getting better in sports and that literally the best guy is basically always going to be whoever the best player in this current era is, just because skill, strategy, medicine, diet, all that stuff is constantly improving. But to me, the greatest of all time, the best of all time, they're effectively synonymous.
For me, it's different, I think, actually. I think
Mm,
greatest, I just take your career in totality. Like, what you accomplished. I think it's more resume and legacy based. When I look at best, I look at talent and ability, and I value that more. So if it is,
That's
I
fair.
mean, it's basically the peak versus like
Yeah.
that kind of dynamic. I think is at the heart of it.
I think I actually tend to agree. I think if I'm talking about the best, it probably is in terms of pure peak. So I would say that Mahomes is the best quarterback that I've ever seen, but Tom Brady up to this point is the greatest. But that's not because of some like amorphous difference in aura between the two of them. Like I feel like some people try to make it out to be. It's just the totality of the resume at this point. Chop says, opinion on Spags play calling. Also, how does this affect Kansas State legend Josh Freeman's legacy? Spags play calling, Logan. Do you have any thoughts? And how about Josh Freeman? How's he affected?
Dude, shout out Josh Freeman. That fired me up a little bit, man. Buccaneers legend. Uh, I didn't think. I don't think Kansas City had the personnel, man. Like Spags, I thought dialed shit up. The Eagles answered almost every. The one time where I thought Spags really won was that Nick Bolton one, but I think the Eagles had Spags eating at the palm of their hand. The play of the game to me, the nail in the coffin, the hammer over the head of the Chiefs, so to speak, is when uh, they threw that ball over the top and Kansas City wasn't ready for it. The Devontae Smith touchdown, like they just weren't ready for that. But moreover, I don't look at this as like a thing on Spags. Honestly, I think the Chiefs got out talented. I don't think they had the
Hmm.
dogs in the fight. If I'm being honest with you, like the cornerback play, I don't think these guys are ready to run up against AJ Brown and Devontae Smith in single coverage. The one thing I will get on him for is the thing that you mentioned early, Carson, in the show when you were talking about them not putting a QB spy on Jalen Hurts. I think that was the greatest mistake of Kansas City in this game. On
Hmm.
top of the disciplinary issues with the costly penalties, that I think takes a back seat, but that's inexcusable to me. Not having a QB spy on every time you're in man coverage because you know Hurts can kill you like that. And the blitz would get home and he'd kill him with the legs. But I thought Spags called an all right game. That's not the biggest take to me. The difference in talent, I thought, was the biggest thing between Philly and Kansas City, with Philly on offense and Kansas City on defense.
I would tend to agree. And I also think that if I were to criticize the play calling of one of Kansas City's coaches, I would probably focus more on Andy Reid. It was a really difficult matchup for them no matter what. Just because, again, when a team is getting pressure on 50% of dropbacks rushing for, what can you really do? And they didn't run the ball at all in the first half, but I didn't they should have because they ran it 3 times and they got 3 yards. Honestly, every time they ran it in the second half, I was pretty pissed, but he certainly didn't deliver at the level that we're used to expecting from him. And I thought that Spags was able to dial up pressure that was effective in a couple spots in the first half. But like you said, the lack of a spy was costly. They did have to compromise their pass defense a bit with how aggressive they were defending the run. And there were a couple times where they just left Jalen Watson one on one with receivers who he couldn't cover. So it wasn't Spags' best game, but he's the GOAT defensive coordinator. There's no question about that. Okay, Dylan is back with another donation. Great game. He had 2 picks and could have avoided 3 sacks. Y'all are treating Mahomes like I'm treating Brady, judging off resume.
He had a bad
I don't know
game,
what
bro.
great game this is referring
Yeah.
to. I mean, I think that Mahomes was terrible. I think we've been pretty clear about that. So maybe I'm misinterpreting, but this was the worst game of Patrick Mahomes' career. Trevor asks an interesting question. Which is a worse hit to the legacy? The 2007 Patriots for Brady or this game getting absolutely killed, missing out on the three-peat to Mahomes?
This one. Oh my gosh, it's
Yeah,
not close. And don't get me wrong, that's a bad game from Brady. They score or no, they end up with
17,
17
right?
points because it was 17-21.
Mhm.
That to me is inexcusable. You needed 22 points to score the game, and you can't cross that threshold. Like that game's on the offense to me at the heart. But
Yeah.
again, we've never seen Tom Brady go out sad like this. I mean, this is a different level of getting your ass whooped. This
That
is
was
a
the game that they had 14. That one was 14-17. 2011 was 17-21.
okay. It's a bad game. It's not like this. I mean, this was an ass kicking start to finish.
Yeah, this is definitely a worse performance by Mahomes. It comes against the better defense. The only argument that you could make that that the Brady loss was more costly to his legacy is just that you were going for the perfect season and you were such a heavy
Mhm.
favorite and you were going up against a wild card New York Giants team that had only won 10 games and barely had a positive point differential. But I still think even considering that this one is worse from Mahomes, just because again, Brady never had that game where you just get cracked in the jaw and embarrassed and destroyed like this one. So I think that this one is probably more costly. Levanesh, thank you for the donation, says 2014 and 2015 Patriots had the 31st ranked pass blocking O line. What are you guys talking about? They beat the Legion of Boom with that. I do
Yeah.
think that those offensive lines regressed in the later years
Mhm.
of Brady's time with the Pats. I'm surprised they were graded that low. And what I would also say, because I think this is about what you said, Logan, about Brady never having to deal with this level of poor offensive line play that Mahomes just did in this game. Legion of Boom, incredible defense. Like I said, to me, the best defense of the last 15 years. They certainly did not have a defensive front that was as dominant as this one. I mean, it's probably the best secondary ever with the LOB. And they could get after the passer, but not like we just saw this Philly team. I don't think
I
that
mean,
Brady
this
ever had to
is
deal with an individual performance like this. Again, 50% pressure rate rushing for every time.
I agree with that fundamentally. Also, I mean, I think 2014 is the down year. So, I mean, this is impressive, but you've still got Solder, you've still got Connolly, you've got Sebastian Vollmer. It's like those guys are
Vollmer.
studs. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so,
David Andrews was
and
solid.
it's just, you can't shout out. It's kind of hard
But
to.
to be fair, you could also look at this Chiefs offensive line right now, and you could say Creed Humphrey, you could say Joe Tooney. Like, there's a lot of
True,
talent.
that's
It's
fair.
just they
You're
got
playing.
destroyed today.
You're playing guys out of position, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about the battle of. There's just such a discrepancy in talent. Like, shout out Michael Bennett, but like you're not dealing with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and this kind of front. I think it's
But you were dealing with crazy eyes Cliff Averill.
and I mean also I mean that's what won the Giants the 2007 and 2011 Super Bowls too. So I mean it's like I don't want
Pass
to.
rush.
This is obviously a bad game from him too, but we have seen Brady get beaten by pressure. Like
Yeah.
happens.
Pressure, man. Like you said, after the quarterback position, it's the most important thing to building a team, and it really might be the single most important thing in terms of determining your average football game. How well can you mitigate the pressure the opposing team gets? How much pressure can you get on your end? And that's why we talk about building from the trenches. That's why football is so much more complicated than quarterback versus quarterback. That's why sometimes you just can't carry a team to a win if you are just getting blasted in the trenches. Pressure is everything. And I think that we saw that again. Mahomes handled the pressure very poorly, but there was a massive, massive gap in terms of that pressure. Okay. Henry donates, "Hey guys, new subscriber here. I'm a Niners fan. How do you see them competing next season? Who are your NFL teams? Niners are coming for the Eagles. Thank you for subscribing, Henry." Quick Niners take, Logan, and then I want to get actually to the future for the two teams that we just saw before we get out of here. What's next for Philly and what's next for the Chiefs?
Starting with the Niners, I think the real issue is going to arise next season when they have to pay Brock Purdy, and it's really going to determine what their salary cap looks like in the future. If they're willing to commit 40 to 50 million dollars of their salary cap to Brock Purdy, I think it would be a catastrophic mistake. I'm very, very comfortable moving with a rookie quarterback or somebody on a cheaper deal. If that means not bringing Purdy back, I think he's a good quarterback, but he's just not worth that money. And fundamentally, I'm just on the side of paying guys what they're worth. Like Saquon Barkley to the Giants, I thought it was a mistake not giving him the extra money that he wanted to go and get a player like Saquon Barkley. Again, you're giving him 15 million, but we're going to commit 40 to Brock. That doesn't equate to me. Um, it's going to be really determined on the health of their big time players too. Is Trent Williams committed? Is he fully healthy? Is Christian McCaffrey fully healthy? Are they going to trade Debo Samuel? There's a lot of stuff that's moving for San Francisco, but fundamentally, they've got the coach. I think they brought Saleh back to be their defensive coordinator, so I like that move. Their offense is great every year under Kyle Shanahan. He's creative. The Niners are going to be competing for the NFC West crown, I think, again next year. But the real questions to me arise when we look a little bit further down the line with Purdy.
So let's talk about these two teams that we just saw in the Super Bowl. I feel like we've covered this game quite thoroughly. What is next, first of all, for the Chiefs? How do they bounce back from this? How much do you expect them to figure into the picture next year when we're talking about the Super Bowl?
Oh, I mean, the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. They're going to be back again here next year. You've got Mahomes. As long as Andy Reid's not ready to hang him up, right? Like,
Yeah.
because Andy's getting up there in age. He is one of the most experienced coaches, one of the most prolific and successful coaches of all time as well. As long as you can bring back Spags, Reed, Kelsey, and Mahomes, I'm really happy. And I like the outlook for their offense moving forward with the talent that they've acquired. Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Juju, if they can retain DeAndre Hopkins. I think you're looking at a team that could be a lot better offensively next season if they have a full year together with this group. Um, I think they've got to invest in the offensive line. I think that has to be probably thing number one, figuring out your tackle situation, seeing if you can get more push up front. Pretty simple. Like they couldn't run the ball effectively this year. And that's why when they shut down Mahomes, there was nothing to turn to. You can't even run the ball because it's not a good running attack. So there's this extra pressure on Mahomes. So to
Mhm.
mitigate and alleviate some of that pressure and to just get better up front, I think you need to invest in the offensive line. And I really think you need to invest in the secondary specifically. There's just a difference in talent, right? I think they had L'Jarius Sneed. You really felt the loss of him in
You
this
did.
game between last year. You really felt it. There's just glaring holes. And you'd really like to get that top tier edge rusher guy off the on the edge. I love Karlaftis. Chris Jones is a monster. You'd want that high end impact guy. So I look, we've been talking about the most important things that won Philly this game. Early in this draft, I would draft edge, I would draft D line, or I would draft offensive line. And the rest of my draft, I would figure out my secondary and linebacker spots. Because I don't think the Chiefs need a ton of skill position talent. I think they've got wideout figured out. I think they've got tight end figured out. I think that you've got quarterback, right? Maybe you get a running back in the late rounds because you can get some good value there. Simple
Mhm.
draft strategy, man. But the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. I expect them to win the AFC West next season. And I'd be surprised if the Chiefs weren't in the AFC title game again next year. Again, Mahomes has been 7 for 7. It's a horrible game. It's the worst game that I think I've ever seen Patrick Mahomes play. But I'd be surprised if the Chiefs aren't in the title game again next season, man. That's the standard that they have set for themselves.
That is the standard that they have set, Logan. I totally agree. I think that there's a big 3 in the AFC. There was this year, there has been for the last few years, honestly. Cincinnati was in the mix for a couple years, but consistently it's been the 3 teams with the 3 best quarterbacks. It's been the Chiefs with Mahomes, it's been the Bills with Josh Allen, it's been the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. I have no reason to believe that the Chiefs will not be right back in the mix next year when you think about the losses that they have survived. Obviously, winning Super Bowls post Tyreek Hill, retooling and improving this defense considerably. As long as they have Chris Jones, as long as they have Spags, as long as they have Andy Reid, as long as they have Patrick Mahomes, I think they're as good a bet as anybody to come out of the AFC. But this roster is flawed. And I would agree with the areas that you pointed to. I think they need to improve at tackle, clearly, after this performance. And playing Tooney out of position just didn't work all that well, but they really had very poor options. But I think that the interior of the offensive line with Tooney at guard is really pretty excellent with him and Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. And then it's just figuring out the tackle spots. Easier said than done, but I think that's priority number one. And I would also look at the secondary. Just been a bit of a question throughout the year. Jalen Watson didn't have a bad year. He did have a really, really bad game, and he's not L'Jarius Sneed. So I would look there as well. And then offensively, I'm never one to overdraft running back. And the only time that the Chiefs really attempted that with Clyde Edwards-Helaire did not go well. But it would sure be nice if they had a more dynamic playmaker in the backfield because I just don't want them to run the ball. Like when they run the ball, to me, it feels like a loss. It feels almost like a wasted down. And they have like the least explosive running back room in football with Kareem Hunt and Isaiah
I
Pacheco.
mean,
They just don't have those sort of big play explosive threats. Pacheco just had a really good playoff run last year, but I would
he,
very much like for them to upgrade there.
he was just never the same after the injury this year. I'm hopeful with a full off season that
Could be.
that he could be better, but he was not the same
No.
runner that we saw last year. And Hunt's solid, but at this stage in his career, he's like a backup level running back. And
Yeah.
again, you just saw how limited this team was in one dimensional they were offensively. they didn't have any alternative, anything to go to, and it really cost them in this one. I mean, there's no. Let me set a hypothetical.
They're gonna get Saquon.
No, 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 no. Hypothetically, the Chiefs are an aggressive team drafting wise. We've seen them trade up to get Mahomes. We've seen them trade up to get Xavier Worthy. If Ashton Jeanty was available at like the 15th pick or 16th, would you be
Ooh,
willing to
well,
trade up and make something like that happen?
maybe. I mean, that would mean that he slid a decent bit because I feel like it's likely
Definitely.
that he goes closer to 10. I'd be okay with it, but it might end up being circumstantial. I'm generally not the biggest fan of trading up in the draft for one player unless you really believe in the guy. But the talent is there, the need is there. But I would be more
What's
focused on rebuilding
I'd
the
get the
tackles first.
I agree.
Just think it's more important.
I'd go tackle. I think secondary and edge is the most important needs for and edge isn't but if there's a high if there's a high upside guy available in the first or second round, I think I may be intrigued enough to but it's
I
not
think their pass rush is there. I mean, with Karloftis and with Chris doing what he does from the inside, I think their defensive line is good. I wouldn't be worried about that. They just wreaked havoc on the Bills last week with a lot of blitzing too. But I think
true.
that they can get pressure. They didn't get pressure like the Eagles did in this game, that's for sure. But defensively, I'm looking at the secondary and offensively, I honestly don't think that Kelsey can be that number one option throughout a run that they need him to be. But Rashee Rice is coming back. I
Exactly.
do think that Worthy really hit in the home stretch of this season. I think that their receiving core in totality is good. Obviously, they just went 15-1 when their starters played and they made the Super Bowl. So even though it wasn't the most impressive 15-1 we've seen because some of the games were ugly and close and they just got their asses kicked. 15-1 in a Super Bowl appearance is what it is, man. And it doesn't take a whole lot to go from that to being back in the Super Bowl or even winning the Super Bowl. How about the Eagles, Logan? What's next for them? Can they replicate this? Can they come back next year and again be one of the best teams that we've seen this century?
The same thing that happened with the Eagles after their first Super Bowl appearance is going to happen with this team. You know, Kellen Moore is going to exit. You're going to have to replace him with a brilliant offensive coordinator. That's priority number one for me if I'm Philadelphia. I think you've got your team laid out. I think this team loves each other. I think that
That's beautiful.
I mean, I think they've got good camaraderie. I think that and the reason I mention that is because I think that
I'm not
guys would
judging. I love it. I thought it was very nice.
the reason I say that is because I think guys would be willing to sacrifice maybe a payday with another team to stay here because of the larger collective. But I don't really see a hole with this group. The offensive line, I think, across the board is phenomenal. I think the defensive line is really good. Maybe you invest in another D tackle or another outside linebacker just because a guy's aging out, like a Brandon Graham, right? Just to replenish the well a little bit. It's done you well thus far. You know,
It's
maybe
true.
maybe dip back in and see if you can get another difference maker. But there's not like a big time need. I'd say wide receiver depth, I think is important. I think maybe tight end depth, like a guy impactful behind Goddard or something like that. Like, you know, because during those games when Brown and Smitty were out, I do think you saw how limited they were down the roster. But it's not like there's a really big need. I think the biggest thing that the Eagles are going to have to do this offseason is make sure that they get a really good offensive coordinator in place because we saw Hurts with a coordinator that wasn't good and it was a down year. It was the worst year of Hurts' career. And we've seen him with two really good offensive coordinators. And what have they resulted in? Two Super Bowl appearances. So I think it's a very intriguing job. You're telling me I get to play with this offensive line and these wideouts and this running. I'm sure they can make a lot of offensive coordinators look really good. So that's probably priority number one. But I don't think they have like a glaring need in the draft, man. I mean, do you? I'd say maybe gearing
No.
up for the exit of older defensive players like a Graham or Darius Slay, but that's it. I don't really think that there's like a hole in this team.
There's definitely not a hole. They do have some notable dudes hitting free agency. Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, as you mentioned, who I think might be done.
You got to go out on top, man. I mean, it just don't get better than this.
Then Zach Bond, that's huge. Mekhi Becton, Avonte Maddox, Milton Williams.
You gonna
They
have
have
to
a
pay.
lot of
You gonna have
dudes.
to pay some of these guys for sure.
Yeah, I feel like if you're gonna pay two of them, it's probably Becton and Bond just because Bond had such an elite season. And I just want to keep this offensive line intact. They've been so good. And Becton has been such a success for them, considering how things went for him in New York. And he's a
He's a
young
difference
guy.
maker just because of how damn big he is,
He is
man.
so huge, bro. He's a massive human being. And Bond is closer to 30, but I just really would want to pay him
He's
after
an
this
all
season that
pro
he
this
had.
year, man. You gotta pay him.
Dominant football player, but they don't have a ton of cap space. I don't think if they're going to be aggressive, they're not going to find their Saquon this year. I'm just trying to retain a couple of those key guys. Josh White obviously was phenomenal here, but they've drafted so well up front, especially. I just don't have concerns, even if they do lose a couple really good football players. There is nobody who I am nearly as confident in replenishing that talent as the Eagles, and they're already the most talented team in football. So, like, there's no reason to think that they won't be back here. Jalen Hurts doesn't have to be a star throughout the regular season. He just kind of has to take care of the football like he did this regular season. And you're probably going to need a really good game from him in the Super Bowl. There will be more pressure on him in a future matchup because you won't have the sort of all-time defensive performance you did in this one. At least I certainly wouldn't think. But you're obviously locked in with him. You're committed with him. All the pieces are in place for this team to remain in the conversation for a bit. I mean, windows aren't super long in the NFL, but when you are this talented everywhere and you have shown an ability to build that it surpasses everybody else in the NFL, like that's how you do it without having the elite quarterback. That's how you stay in these conversations. And that's what Philly epitomizes right now.
Completely agree, man. I think they're going to be, I can't say right back here because there is a team that I think that I like more at full strength. I think I
Detroit?
like Detroit more just because, but it's trench teams, man. Draft early, draft big dudes, draft nasty guys, draft dudes that are just going
Nasty. Get
big,
dirty.
big nasty dudes in the trenches win you big football games, and that's why the Eagles have been successful. And that is just my key to football, man. Get the trench guys figured out, everything else will fall into place.
I tend to agree. I think that Philly versus healthy Detroit would be a heavyweight bout. I do think Detroit is the better offense, but
They're fighting that coordinator dilemma as well, though, man. I think that's actually
they are.
probably the most important storyline about those teams in this offseason.
I think that Philly is the safer bet because this defense is just that great. And I think that's what they've proven this season. And the offense is really good, but I don't view Kellen Moore as that big of a departure. I didn't think he was great this year. It's not like Ben Johnson leaving. It's not remotely close to that. And they're going to keep Fangio. He's too old to go be a head coach somewhere. He's just going to ride it out. And he can be like their Spags because Spags is too old and
Bro,
he
you
was too
read my mind.
unsuccessful as a
You
head
read my
coach.
mind, man.
It's a good spot to be in. I will say we're talking about coaching. You know who I'm not really moved by with this Super Bowl victory? Nick Sirianni. That's no hate, and that's no hate, but
Dude, but him and McDermott have such high win percentages, Carson.
that's the comparison I was gonna make. It's kind of like if the Bills won a Super Bowl with Sean McDermott, I'd feel like you're overcoming it. And I didn't feel like they were overcoming Sirianni in this run, but I also didn't feel like he was adding
You
value.
know
It's tough
what?
if you're not going to be a play caller.
I can't remember who laid it out, but I don't think Sirianni's like a mastermind or anything, but I think he fits the city. I think he just works for
Because
Philly.
he's a dick.
Yeah, I think he embodies Philadelphia, which, you know what?
Can't hate. Won the
All
Super
right.
Bowl. Can't hate, won the Super Bowl, but I'm definitely not wowed by his performance. Speaking of Sean McDermott, though, you know what, Logan? I do think after this game, what a condemnation of the Bills defense. Now, not to say that you're supposed to go out there and pressure Mahomes 50% of the time and force multiple turnovers and rack up 6+ sacks, but the fact that you've seen them 4 times in the playoffs and you have not for 1 second made him uncomfortable and you've allowed 35 points
And
per game and he has 1 turnover, it's
Philly looked
so bad.
and Philly looked so exceptionally well prepared for everything they were going to do. And
Yeah.
obviously, it starts with the amount of pressure that Philadelphia can get. Right, that's the complete difference in why they're able to affect Mahomes. But
And
you're
just
right.
talent. It's just a more talented defense, too.
But Buffalo hasn't even. I mean, they're Swiss cheese when they play Kansas City.
Good regular season defense, get absolutely diced up. Conservative ass zones, weak
Word to
stuff. And they changed it
Pittsburgh.
up a
Word to
little.
Pittsburgh.
They changed it up a little this year, but then they lost Benford. But that's a really, really bad showing for the Buffalo defense. It puts things into perspective when you see this is a special defense, but the gap is the size of the Pacific Ocean. We have another donation and another question from Henry. Do you guys visualize an NFL team ever three-peating in the next 15 years? It's crazy the last American sports team to three-peat were the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq.
No,
No.
I do not. I think it is the Chiefs are probably going to get as close as anybody. I mean,
Mhm.
NFL, it's so much harder just because of one, all of the moving parts and all of the variables that a team can have in one offseason with a
Yeah.
roster of 54 guys, with the coaching staffs, with injuries because of what a brutal sport it is. Like, there's so many moving parts with football. I think it's the hardest sport to repeat in.
Yep.
But to me, with basketball, everybody's so talented nowadays that it's and injuries play a crucial part too, right? Availability when it comes playoff time. I wouldn't. I mean, if there's one team, I maybe say Oklahoma City or maybe
Yeah.
Boston, if they're going to rattle off two in a row here where they could do it, those are the best candidates in my opinion. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't guess it, man. It's so much harder to do it, I think, than back when the leagues were smaller and these teams weren't as talented as they were. I wouldn't bet on it, man. I think the Chiefs got about as close as we're going to see.
Well, expanding the question to NBA, I think there's a real chance. Now, I will say, when you're talking about factors that make it more difficult, it's not just the depth of talent. Also, now you have some of the second apron cap constraints. I think it is much more likely in the NBA, though. We've just seen the NBA is a league of dynasties. It is a league where that superstar all time force can individually keep you in the conversation year after year. That's a much rarer thing in the NFL. Drew Brees can be at the peak of his powers and miss the playoffs for multiple consecutive seasons because there's a full side of the ball that he can't have a single iota of impact on, and they're terrible. So I think this was the best chance for a three-peat that we're going to see in a long, long time. I think it's incredible that the Chiefs were able to do this, that they were able to reinvent themselves, remain an elite offense post Tyreek in 2022, and then take a step back offensively, but take a step forward defensively over the past couple years. It's incredible that they got this close, but I don't think that we're going to see it from anybody else anytime soon. At least that's for sure. Any final thoughts on this game, Logan, or this NFL season as we wrap things up?
Don't be scared. Be aggressive. Take
Yes.
chances. Don't play scared football, man. That's my big takeaway from this year. You got to be aggressive. You got to swing big sometimes. You got to miss big, but the payout is worth it, man. I think that
It's
you got to be
beautiful.
aggressive, man.
That's
Don't let the
beautiful.
dude. Don't let the fear of missing stop you from shooting your shot, bro.
That's so beautiful, bro. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Michael Scott,
Michael Scott, Wayne Gretzky.
Naz
This
Reid.
was a really bad Super Bowl, though. Let's just be honest about that. And it
That's
always
this
really
is the
bums
worst
me when
super.
there's a bad Super
Bro,
Bowl.
can I be 100% honest with you, bro?
Please. That's all I ever want.
I didn't watch a fourth quarter, man. We went outside and just threw the football around. Like,
Why would you?
it just I was really disappointed. Like, not even I didn't really care who won the game just because I didn't have a dog in the fight. I just wanted a
Yeah,
good game, and it wasn't.
agreed.
It's the worst Super Bowl I've watched since the Peyton one, and that one was
It was
that was a
terrible.
stinker. But
Yeah, and we've
this
had a
might have been
couple
more
since
disappointing.
then. I mean, the Tampa Bay one was a
Well,
beatdown.
the Rams game I didn't
That
watch,
sucked.
so that
You were
one.
protesting Tom Brady at that point. That was a bad watch. This was worse. I don't know. It's just like when the game is clearly out of grasp so early, it's hard to stay engaged. That's the risk that you have with a single game format. And by the way, that's probably the biggest reason, even more than the roster turnover, that it's almost impossible to three-peat in the NFL, because that means that you have to be perfect for 3 to 4 straight games for 3 straight years. It's not like the NBA where, okay, you drop a game, that's fine. All you gotta do is win 4 out of 7 in total. You have to be the better team every single game for 3 consecutive postseasons. That's so, so hard to pull off. We've been treated to a lot of great Super Bowls in recent years, including the last 3 in a row, especially the last 2, so can't complain. We've been spoiled, but that was definitely a disappointing end to the season. But shout out to the Eagles, man. 2 in the last decade, 2 totally different teams.
I mean, completely different organizations, top to bottom, dude.
Mhm.
Infrastructure is just
Except for
nowhere.
Howie.
Yeah. The one thing I'd say is we at least didn't have to endure the run that the NFC had over the AFC for however long it was. I mean, that is like the worst stretch of Super Bowls
No, for
in
real. We
NFL
didn't have to
history, man.
watch Denver get beaten by 30 to 45 points every other year. We did not have to
All
witness
right,
that.
you had
Or the Bills,
the
all right, which
Niners
we're not going to talk
Chargers
about.
beat down. Like
Yeah.
there's just some stinkers from man. I mean, this run is kind of impressive here from the NFC from like 84 to
Well, it's 13 straight, right? And a lot of
97.
blowouts in there.
Yeah, dude.
So it's true. We've been spoiled with Super Bowls in recent years, but this one was not good at all. But shout out to the Eagles and shout out to all of you who enjoyed this NFL season alongside us, who watched our shows post game, who watched our show today. We really appreciate you. And we hope that all of you who are NBA fans are going to be sticking with us and locked in throughout NBA season because there's already so much awesome stuff to talk about with all of the new players moved through trade and their new destinations. We got a lot of awesome stuff to dig into, and we are going to do so over the next few months. You better believe that. We have one final donation. Trevor says Angela White versus Natasha. Nice go. We're not going to touch on that one, Trevor, but thank you for all of the donations today. And thank you to all of you. If you want more of our content, you can follow us across social media, TikTok, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can find all of our NBA and NFL content, all of our full shows, and our video essays, video breakdowns on our YouTube channel. And you can find all of our full episodes across all audio platforms. You can also join our Discord if you want to chat with the gang. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. And you can check out our merch at breakingtea.com. That is also linked in our link tree. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.